The glass of the Emerald Sky Lounge did more than just offer a view, it filtered the world into two distinct categories, those who belonged above the clouds, and those who scrambled beneath them. At 4:02 a.m., the lounge was a cathedral of silence, illuminated by the amber glow of recessed LED strips and the distant, twinkling grid of the city 80 stories below. It was the flagship of the Pendelton International Empire, a masterclass in quiet luxury. Every curve of the Italian leather chairs, every gram of the hand-poured concrete flooring, and the specific scent of sandalwood and rain-drenched cedar had been personally approved by one man. That man was currently slouching in seat 42B, a quiet corner tucked behind a structural pillar. Arthur Pendelton didn't look like a man who appeared on the cover of Forbes. He looked like a man who had been caught in a storm and lost. He was 42, though the salt and pepper stubble dusting his jawline made him look 50. His eyes, a sharp, architectural gray, were bloodshot from a 14-hour flight from Tokyo. He wore a charcoal-colored hoodie with a frayed hem and a pair of denim jeans that had seen better days at a construction site in Osaka. To the casual observer, he was a drifter who had somehow bypassed security. To Arthur, he was simply home. Arthur opened his tablet. It wasn't a standard consumer model, it was a Pendelton tech prototype, its screen cracked at the corner but its processor more powerful than most high-end workstations. He began to scroll through the blueprints for the Ethelgard project, a sustainable housing initiative that was currently hemorrhaging money. He rubbed his temples. He could have stayed in the presidential suite. He could have signaled his arrival and been met with a motorcade and a heated towel. But Arthur had a quirk: he hated the Billionaire performance. He wanted to see his creations as they truly were, not as they were presented to him by nervous middle managers. "Sir." The voice was crisp, cutting through Arthur's thoughts like a serrated knife through silk. Arthur didn't look up immediately. He was focused on a structural flaw in the 7th floor cantilever. "Sir, I'm talking to you." Arthur finally lifted his gaze. Standing before him was a young man who looked like he had been sculpted out of ego and hair gel. His name tag read Marcus, floor lead. Marcus wore the Pendelton uniform, a bespoke charcoal vest and white silk tie with a level of arrogance that Arthur found deeply ironic. "Can I help you, Marcus?" Arthur asked, his voice gravelly and low. Marcus didn't offer a menu. He didn't offer a greeting. Instead, he placed a hand on the edge of Arthur's table, his fingers inching dangerously close to the tablet. "This is the Emerald Sky Lounge. Access is restricted to Diamond Tier members and those with a confirmed reservation at the Pendelton Grand." Arthur blinked, slowly. "I'm aware. I'm a regular." Marcus let out a short, dry laugh, the kind of sound a person makes when they think they've caught someone in a clumsy lie. He looked Arthur up and down, lingering on the frayed hoodie and the scuffed boots. "Regulars here don't usually look like they've spent the night in a bus station," Marcus said, leaning in. "We have a standard to maintain. There are important people arriving for the morning rush. High net worth individuals who pay for the atmosphere. You are, quite frankly, a smudge on that atmosphere." Arthur felt a spark of something, not quite anger, but a weary amusement. He had designed this lounge to be a sanctuary for everyone, a place where the weary traveler could find peace. He had explicitly instructed his HR directors that the Pendelton way was about hospitality, not elitism. "I'm just waiting for a coffee and finishing some work," Arthur said, turning his attention back to the blueprints. "I won't be in anyone's way." "You're in my way," Marcus snapped, his voice dropping an octave to signal authority. "I've had my eye on you since you walked in. I don't know which backdoor service elevator you snuck up in, but I'm giving you 2 minutes to pack that, whatever that gadget is, and head back down to the lobby. The cafeteria there serves a very decent instant coffee." "Is that the Pendelton policy?" Arthur asked, his thumb tracing the logo of his company embossed on the corner of his tablet, hidden under his palm. "To judge a guest by the thread count of their sweater." Marcus sneered, straightening his vest. The Pendelton policy is excellence. And you, sir, are a distraction from excellence. You have 1 minute. Arthur watched Marcus walk away to attend to a woman in a fur coat who had just entered. He watched the way Marcus bowed slightly, his voice dripping with honeyed subservience. It was a performance. A fake, hollow version of what Arthur had built his empire to represent. He looked down at his tablet. He could call the general manager. He could end Marcus's career with a single text message. But there was a nagging curiosity in his chest. He wanted to see how far this would go. He wanted to see the rot in his own house before he cut it out. Arthur didn't leave. Instead, he leaned back, crossed his legs, and waited. He wasn't just a guest anymore, he was a ghost haunting his own halls, watching the man he paid to represent him turn his dream into a playground for snobs. The morning sun began to bleed over the horizon, turning the emerald sky into a bruised purple. The lounge was filling up. The stage was set. Arthur Pendelton was about to be kicked out of his own building. The transition from the pre-dawn stillness to the power breakfast rush at the Emerald Sky Lounge was a choreographed performance. By 6:30 a.m., the atmosphere had shifted from a sanctuary to a stage. The soft jazz that had played at a whisper was replaced by a more driving, rhythmic ambient track, the kind of music that encouraged high-stakes decision-making and rapid-fire networking. The scent of expensive espresso and freshly baked artisan pastries now dominated the air, cutting through the sandalwood. The patrons arriving were the titans of the morning, men in $5 Brioni suits and women in razor-sharp blazers, their eyes fixed on the flickering green and red of global market tickers on their phones. In the middle of the sea of sartorial perfection sat Arthur Pendelton. He remained in seat 42B, a small island of rumpled cotton and tired eyes. To his right, a hedge fund manager named Julian Vane had just sat down. Vane was a regular who treated the lounge like his personal office, and he had a habit of making his presence known. He caught sight of Arthur specifically, Arthur's worn-out hoodie and the cracked screen of his tablet, and his lip curled in an instinctive gesture of social Darwinism. Vane snapped his fingers, a sound that rang out like a gunshot in the refined space. Marcus appeared instantly, his back straightening into a perfect, subservient arc. "Good morning, Mr. Vane. Your usual Blue Mountain roast is on its way." "Marcus," Vane said, his voice loud enough to carry. "I pay a $30,000 annual membership fee for the exclusivity of this lounge. I didn't realize the Pendelton had started a charity outreach program for the local shelters." He nodded pointedly toward Arthur. Marcus's face flushed a deep, embarrassed red. He felt the weight of the other guests' gazes. In the ecosystem of the Emerald Sky, the opinion of a man like Julian Vane was the only currency that mattered. To Marcus, Arthur wasn't just a guest, he was a stain on a white silk sheet that Marcus was responsible for keeping pristine. Marcus turned toward Arthur, his posture no longer that of a waiter, but of an executioner. He didn't even pretend to offer service this time. He stood over Arthur, casting a long shadow across the digital blueprints on the tablet. "I believe I gave you 2 minutes, Marcus whispered, his voice trembling with suppressed rage. "It has been 20. You are officially trespassing on private property." Arthur didn't look up from his screen. He was currently looking at a line item for staff training and sensitivity. He had spent $4 million last year on that program. Clearly, it had been a poor investment. "I'm almost finished with this section, Marcus," Arthur said calmly. "And I'd still like that double espresso. I noticed you served Mr. Vane first, despite the fact that I've been waiting for 40 minutes. That's a breach of the first in, first served protocol established in the Pendelton Service Manual, page 12. Marcus stiffened. The mention of the manual felt like a personal insult. "I don't need a lecture on service from a vagrant. You've had your chance. Now, you're making the real guests uncomfortable. Look at yourself. You're an eyesore. Is that the official reason for my removal?" Arthur asked, finally looking up. His gray eyes were unnervingly steady. That I am an eyesore. The reason, Marcus hissed, leaning down so only Arthur could hear, is that you don't belong here. This place is for people who build things, people who matter. You're just a ghost who wandered in through the wrong door. Now, stand up, or I will have security carry you out. Arthur sighed, a sound of deep, weary disappointment. He wasn't disappointed that he was being kicked out, he was disappointed that his vision of a universal home had been corrupted into a gate-kept fortress of arrogance. He didn't move. Marcus turned to the podium and tapped a hidden button. Within seconds, two large men in dark suits and earpieces, members of the Pendelton elite security team, appeared at the entrance of the lounge. Marcus signaled them over with a frantic, authoritative wave. This individual is refusing to leave, Marcus told the guards, his voice rising now, drawing the attention of every billionaire and CEO in the room. He has no credentials, no reservation, and he's harassing our Diamond members. The lead guard, a man named Henderson, whom Arthur actually remembered from a company-wide Christmas gala 3 years ago, looked at Arthur. However, between the stubble, the hoodie, and the dim lighting of the corner booth, Henderson didn't see his boss. He saw a problem that needed to be solved quickly and quietly. "Sir," Henderson said, his hand resting near his belt. "Let's make this easy. Stand up and walk out, and we won't have to involve the police." "Henderson," Arthur said, testing the name. "Check the facial recognition logs for the elevator you just came up in. It might save you a very long, very painful conversation with your supervisor." Henderson paused, a flicker of doubt crossing his face. But Marcus wasn't about to let his moment of triumph slip away. "He's bluffing. He's just another crazy trying to sound important. Look at his clothes. Look at that tablet, it's cracked. Get him out of here before Mr. Vane calls the corporate office." The pressure of the important crowd was too much. Henderson reached down and grabbed Arthur's upper arm. It wasn't a violent grip, but it was firm. It was the grip of a man removing trash. "That's enough," Henderson said. "Let's go." Arthur stood up. He didn't resist. He realized that if he fought back now, he would be just as undignified as they were. He picked up his cracked tablet and tucked it under his arm. As he was led toward the exit, Marcus walked alongside them, a smug, victorious grin plastered across his face. As they passed the center bar, Marcus grabbed a small reserved sign and placed it on the table Arthur had just vacated. "And don't bother coming back," Marcus called out as they reached the glass elevators. "We have eyes everywhere now. You're blacklisted from the Pendelton Grand. Permanently." The elevator doors opened. Arthur stepped inside, flanked by the guards. Just before the doors slid shut, he looked Marcus directly in the eye. "You're right about one thing, Marcus," Arthur said, his voice chillingly level. "You do have eyes everywhere. But you've forgotten how to see." The silver doors closed. Marcus turned back to the lounge, basking in the light applause from Julian Vane and a few other patrons. He felt like a hero. He felt like he had protected the sanctity of the Empire. He had no idea that he had just escorted the Emperor to the front gate, and the Emperor was about to return with the fire of 1,000 suns. The descent in the glass-walled elevator was silent, save for the faint, mechanical hum of the world's fastest vertical transport system. Arthur Pendelton stood between the two security guards, his reflection in the polished chrome doors showing a man who looked defeated to the untrained eye. But behind that salt and pepper stubble, Arthur's mind was a chessboard, and he had just sacrificed a pawn to trap a king. Henderson, the lead guard, kept his eyes forward, his jaw set in a line of professional indifference. He didn't enjoy this part of the job, but he believed in the sanctity of the brand. To him, the man in the hoodie was a breach in the hull of a luxury liner. As the elevator hissed open at the ground floor far away from the velvet ropes and the $400 breakfasts, Arthur stepped out. Don't come back, sir, Henderson said, his voice devoid of malice but heavy with finality. For your own sake. The police are the next step. Arthur didn't turn around. He simply reached into the pocket of his frayed hoodie and pulled out a burner phone, a simple, encrypted device he used for emergencies. As the elevator doors slid shut, he hit a single speed dial button. "Sarah," Arthur said as soon as the line picked up. "I'm in the north lobby. I need the Vanguard kit. And call Sterling. Tell him I'm ready for our 7:30 a.m. walkthrough. But don't tell him where I am. Let him find me." 80 floors above, Marcus was having the best morning of his career. He moved through the Emerald Sky Lounge with a new spring in his step. He had successfully sanitized the environment. Julian Vane, the hedge fund titan, had even given him a knowing nod as he passed, a gesture of solidarity between the elite and the help that kept the elite comfortable. "Excellent work, Marcus," Vane remarked, sipping his Blue Mountain coffee. "It's getting harder and harder to find places that still have standards." "That fellow," he looked like he crawled out of a storm drain. "It's my pleasure, Mr. Vane," Marcus replied, his voice brimming with a newfound sense of self-importance. "The Pendelton name stands for a certain caliber of guest. I won't allow that to be compromised on my watch." Marcus walked over to seat 42B to ensure the reserved sign was perfectly centered. He noticed a small, black stylus pen that the intruder had left behind on the table. It was heavy, made of matte black titanium, with a subtle, engraved P on the cap. Marcus picked it up, intending to throw it in the trash, but he paused. It felt expensive. Too expensive for a drifter. The heavy oak doors of the lounge swung open with a force that made the crystal chandeliers rattle. Terence Sterling, the general manager of the Pendelton Grand, marched in. Sterling was a man who lived and breathed logistics. He was known for his impeccable pinstripe suits and a temperament that was usually as cool as a refrigerated wine cellar. Today, however, he was sweating. His silk tie was slightly askew, and he was clutching a tablet like a life raft. "Marcus!" Sterling barked, his voice cutting through the ambient jazz. Marcus hurried over, a smile plastered on his face. "Ah, Mr. Sterling. You'll be pleased to know I've cleared up a bit of a security lapse this morning. We had a trespasser in the VIP section." "I don't care about trespassers," Sterling interrupted, his eyes darting around the room frantically. "I just got off the phone with the chairman's office. Mr. Pendelton arrived on a private flight 4 hours ago. He told his chief of staff he was coming directly here to observe the morning operations before the board meeting." Marcus's smile faltered, just a fraction. "The chairman? Here? Well, I haven't seen any motorcades, sir. Security hasn't reported any VIP arrivals at the main entrance." Sterling stopped. He looked at the empty seat 42B. He looked at the reserved sign. Then, he looked at the matte black stylus pen in Marcus's hand. "Where did you get that?" Sterling whispered, his face turning a ghostly shade of gray. Marcus looked down at the pen. The trespasser left it?" "A guy in a hoodie. He was sitting right there, taking up space, looking at some cracked tablet. I had Henderson and Miller escort him out about 10 minutes ago." The silence that followed was visceral. It was the sound of a career hitting a brick wall at 200 miles per hour. Sterling's tablet slipped from his hand, saved only by the wrist strap. "A hoodie," he croaked. "Gray eyes. Salt and pepper hair? About 6'1". Marcus felt a cold stone form in his stomach. "Yes, sir. But he didn't have a suit. He didn't have a badge. He was incredibly disrespectful to Mr. Vane." "You idiot," Sterling breathed. He didn't yell, the sheer lack of volume was more terrifying. "Arthur Pendelton hates suits. He designed the prototype for that cracked tablet himself. That stylus in your hand? It's a custom-tooled piece of engineering worth more than your annual salary. Sterling turned on his heel and began to sprint toward the security podium, his polished shoes skidding on the marble. Henderson. Miller. Get back here. Who did you just eject? The guests in the lounge had stopped eating. Even Julian Vane looked pale. The realization was spreading through the room like a virus. They hadn't witnessed the removal of a vagrant, they had witnessed a coup against the king, and they had all cheered for the wrong side. Downstairs, in a private, high-security staging room near the service entrance, the ghost was disappearing. Arthur Pendelton stood as Sarah, his chief of staff, draped a bespoke, midnight blue jacket over his shoulders. A professional stylist was quickly trimming his stubble into a sharp, intentional line. The worn-out hoodie lay in a heap on the floor, discarded like a snake's old skin. The general manager is in a state of total collapse, Arthur, Sarah said, checking her watch. He's currently reviewing the security footage. He's realized it was you. Arthur looked at himself in the mirror. Gone was the weary traveler. In his place stood the architect of the city, a man whose influence reached into the halls of government and the vaults of the world's largest banks. Good, Arthur said, adjusting his French cuffs. I wanted him to see it. I wanted him to see exactly how his staff treats someone they think has nothing to offer them. And the waiter? Marcus? Sarah asked. Arthur picked up a fresh tablet, one without a cracked screen. Marcus is a symptom of a larger disease, Sarah. He thinks he's protecting the brand, but he's actually killing it. The Pendelton Grand wasn't built to be a fortress for the arrogant. It was built to be a home for the excellent. He turned toward the door, his eyes cold and focused. Let's go back up. I believe I still haven't received my coffee. The silence in the Emerald Sky Lounge was no longer the curated, expensive silence of luxury. It was the heavy, suffocating silence of a funeral parlor. Terence Sterling, the general manager, stood by the elevator bank, his fingers twitching rhythmically against his thighs. He had cleared the entrance of all staff except for Marcus, who stood like a statue carved from salt. Marcus's eyes were fixed on the floor, his mind replaying the last hour in a feverish loop. It was just a hoodie, he kept whispering to himself internally. He looked like a nobody. Anyone would have done the same. But anyone didn't own a global conglomerate. Anyone didn't have their name etched into the steel beams of the very floor Marcus was standing on. The chime of the express elevator, a soft, melodic G-sharp, echoed through the foyer. The digital display above the doors flickered from G to 80 in a matter of seconds. The doors slid open. Arthur Pendelton did not storm out of the elevator. He stepped out with the measured, predatory grace of a man who owned the air everyone else was breathing. The transformation was absolute. The salt and pepper stubble had been trimmed into a sharp, silver-lined jawline that looked like it could cut glass. The frayed hoodie was gone, replaced by a midnight blue wool and silk suit that seemed to absorb the morning light. His white shirt was crisp enough to bleed on, held together by sapphire cufflinks that cost more than Marcus's college tuition. Behind him followed a phalanx of power, Sarah, his chief of staff, 2 senior legal partners in charcoal suits, and 4 security detail members who made Henderson and Miller look like mall cops. Sterling stepped forward, his voice cracking on the first syllable. Mr. Pendelton. Arthur. I cannot begin to express the... Arthur didn't even look at him. He walked past Sterling as if the man were a piece of poorly placed furniture. He walked straight toward the center of the lounge, his leather Oxfords clicking rhythmically against the marble. The elite guests, the Julian Vanes of the world, froze with their coffee cups halfway to their lips. They recognized the face now. They recognized the power. Arthur stopped at the edge of the VIP section. He looked at seat 42B. The reserved sign Marcus had placed there was still sitting on the table, a tiny plastic monument to Marcus's arrogance. Marcus, Arthur said. His voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It was the kind of voice that commanded a boardroom of 300 people with a whisper. Marcus stepped forward, his legs feeling like they were made of wet cardboard. He didn't look up. He couldn't. Yes, sir. Look at me, Marcus, Arthur commanded. Slowly, painfully, Marcus raised his head. His face was pale, his forehead beaded with sweat. I am so sorry, Mr. Pendelton. I didn't know. I was only trying to protect the... Protect what? Arthur interrupted, his gray eyes narrowing. The aesthetic. The vibe. Tell me, what part of the Pendelton employee handbook suggests that hospitality is a privilege reserved for those in Italian silk? I thought you were a trespasser, Marcus stammered. You didn't have a membership card. You didn't. I built the membership system, Arthur said quietly. And I deliberately designed it so that the staff would treat every guest with the same level of dignity, whether they were a billionaire or a backpacker looking for a quiet place to work. You didn't fail to recognize me, Marcus. You failed to recognize a human being. Suddenly, Julian Vane stood up from his nearby table. He cleared his throat, a greasy smile spreading across his face. Arthur. Good to see you, old man, Vane said, extending a hand as he walked over. Don't be too hard on the lad. He was just doing his job. We all know how many unwanteds try to sneak up here. He was just looking out for us, the actual members. Arthur turned his gaze to Vane. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Julian, Arthur said, ignoring the outstretched hand. I heard what you said earlier. Something about charity outreach and standard of exclusivity. Vane's smile faltered. Oh, come now, it was just a joke. I didn't realize it was you. If I'd known. That's the point, Julian, Arthur said, his voice dripping with icy disdain. If you'd known it was me, you would have been the first to offer me a seat. But because you thought I was lesser, you treated me like trash. You are a member of this lounge because I allowed you to buy a card. As of 5 minutes ago, that membership is revoked. Sterling will refund your annual fee pro rata. Get out. The lounge gasped. Vane looked like he'd been slapped. You can't do that. My firm handles. I can do whatever I want with my own building, Arthur said. Sarah, make sure Mr. Vane is escorted to the lobby. Use the service elevator. I believe he thinks the main elevators are too good for unwanteds. As Vane was led away in stunned silence, Arthur turned back to Marcus and Sterling. Sterling looked like he was about to have a heart attack. And you, Terence, Arthur said to the general manager. You've been running this hotel for 5 years. I trusted you to instill my values in this staff. Instead, you've created a culture of snobbery that is an embarrassment to the Pendelton name. Arthur, please, Sterling pleaded. I'll fire him. I'll fire Marcus right now. I'll fire the security team. No, Arthur said. Marcus looked up, a glimmer of hope in his eyes. Firing you would be too easy, Arthur continued, looking directly at Marcus. You'd just go find another job at some other exclusive club and continue being the same person. You need a perspective shift. You think you're better than the people who don't wear suits? You think the foundation of this company is the people in this lounge? Arthur leaned in, his voice becoming a low vibration of authority. The foundation of Pendelton International isn't the Emerald Sky Lounge. It's the loading docks. It's the laundry rooms. It's the people who wake up at 3 a.m. to make sure the sheets are clean and the food is fresh, people who you would likely step over in the street without a second thought. Arthur looked at Sterling. Reassign Marcus. Effective immediately. He is to report to the basement loading bay. He will work the 4 a.m. shift, unloading crates and checking manifests. He will stay there for 6 months. If he misses a single day, or if I hear one complaint about his attitude toward the drivers, he's finished in this industry. Marcus's jaw dropped. From the 80th floor VIP lounge to the literal basement. It was a fall further than he could have imagined. And Marcus? Arthur added as he sat back down in seat 42B, the very spot he'd been kicked out of. Yes, sir. Marcus whispered. I'm still waiting for that double espresso. And this time, make sure it's hot. Arthur opened his tablet, the new one, with the flawless glass screen. He went back to the Ethelgard project blueprints. Around him, the lounge slowly began to move again, but the atmosphere had changed. The guests spoke in hushed tones. The staff moved with a newfound, trembling respect for every person they passed. Arthur Pendelton had returned to his throne, and the message was clear: in his empire, the only thing more important than the brand was the soul behind it. The digital clock on the concrete wall of the Pendelton Grand Loading Bay flickered to 4 a.m. In the world above, the city was still dreaming. In the world below, the heart of the machine was starting to beat. Marcus stood at the edge of Bay 4, shivering in a heavy, high-visibility orange vest that felt like a lead weight on his shoulders. His hands, once soft and manicured for the delicate handling of crystal stemware, were now shoved into rough leather work gloves. His feet, accustomed to the plush carpets of the emerald sky, throbbed in steel-toed boots that felt 2 sizes too big. Hey, new guy. Stop daydreaming. We've got 3 trucks from the organic farm coming in hot, and the industrial laundry lift is jammed again, a voice boomed. It was Gus, a man who looked like he had been carved out of a single block of granite. Gus had worked the Pendelton loading docks for 30 years. He didn't care about diamond tiers or VIP memberships. To Gus, there were only 2 kinds of people, those who pulled their weight and those who got in the way. I'm on it, Marcus muttered, his voice raspy. He reached for a heavy crate of artisanal spring water, the very same water he used to pour with a flourish for Julian Vane. Now, he was just the muscle moving it from a refrigerated truck to a pallet jack. As the hours bled into a gray, subterranean morning, Marcus began to see things he had ignored for years. He saw the delivery drivers who drove 6 hours through the night just to ensure the lounge had fresh berries by dawn. He saw the janitorial staff, immigrants and working-class fathers who laughed and shared thermoses of cheap coffee while they scrubbed the grime of the city off the hotel's pristine exterior. He realized that if one of these men stopped working for an hour, the Emerald Sky Lounge would collapse. The silk ties would have no coffee. The hedge fund managers would have no clean napkins. The excellence Marcus had been so proud of was a house of cards built on the backs of the men in this basement. At 9 a.m., Marcus was hunched over a manifest, trying to reconcile a shipment of Belgian chocolate that had been mislabeled. His back was a map of agony. Tough morning. Marcus didn't look up. Every morning is tough down here, Gus. I don't know how you do this for 30 years without losing your mind. It's simple, kid, Gus said, leaning against a forklift. I know that without me, that building up there is just a very tall, very expensive tombstone. I'm the one who keeps it alive. There's pride in that. More pride than there is in sucking up to a man who doesn't know your last name. Marcus paused. He thought of Julian Vane, how quickly Vane had turned on him when Arthur Pendelton appeared. Gus was right. In the lounge, Marcus had been a prop. Here, he was a part of the engine. A shadow fell across the loading bay. The heavy roar of the industrial fan seemed to dampen as a figure walked down the concrete ramp. Marcus froze. He recognized that gait, the slow, deliberate pace of a man who was always 3 steps ahead of the world. Arthur Pendelton wasn't wearing the $10 suit from the day before. He was back in the charcoal hoodie, the faded jeans, and the scuffed boots. He looked exactly like the vagant Marcus had kicked out 48 hours ago. Mr. Pendelton, Marcus said, standing up straight. He didn't bow. He didn't scramble. He just stood there, covered in dust and sweat, holding a clipboard. Arthur walked up to the pallet of spring water. He picked up a bottle, looked at the label, and then looked at Marcus. "How's the lobby speed treating you, Marcus?" "It's faster than I thought, sir," Marcus replied, his voice steady. "And a lot heavier." Arthur leaned against a concrete pillar. "I spoke to Gus. He says you haven't complained once. He also said you helped a driver from the Bronx fix a flat tire on his rig 2 hours ago. That wasn't in your job description." Marcus looked down at his gloved hands. The driver was behind schedule. If he didn't get his truck out, the next one couldn't get in. It was logical. "It was hospitality," Arthur corrected him. "Real hospitality isn't about knowing which fork to use. It's about making sure the people around you have what they need to succeed. Whether that's a glass of wine or a hand with a tire." Arthur reached into his hoodie pocket and pulled out the matte black titanium stylus, the one Marcus had almost thrown away. He set it on Marcus's clipboard. "I'm ending your reassignment early," Arthur said. Marcus blinked. A wave of relief washed over him, but it was followed by a strange, unexpected pang of hesitation. "You're sending me back to the lounge?" "No," Arthur said, a ghost of a smile playing on his lips. "The Emerald Sky doesn't need a waiter like you anymore. And frankly, you're overqualified for it now. I'm opening a new branch of Pendelton International in South London next month. It's a community-focused hub, half luxury hotel, half affordable housing for young creators. It's a project that requires someone who understands both the penthouse and the pavement." Arthur pointed at the clipboard. "I want you to go there as the junior operations manager. You'll report directly to Sterling's successor. You'll be in charge of the staff training, all of it. From the penthouse to the loading bay." Marcus felt a lump form in his throat. "After what I did to you?" "Why?" Arthur turned to walk back up the ramp, his silhouette framed by the bright morning sun at the top of the incline. "Because, Marcus," Arthur called back, "the best architects are the ones who have spent time in the dirt. They're the only ones who know how to build a foundation that won't crack." 6 months later, the South London Pendelton opened its doors. A young woman walked into the lobby. She was wearing a rain-soaked trench coat and carrying a heavy portfolio. She looked tired, messy, and decidedly non-VIP. A waiter started to approach her with a skeptical look on his face, but a hand caught his shoulder. Marcus, dressed in a sharp but modest suit, smiled at the waiter. "I'll handle this one," he said. He walked up to the woman, bowed his head slightly, and didn't look at her clothes. He looked at her eyes. "Welcome to the Pendelton, ma'am," Marcus said softly. "It's a long way up from the street. Would you like a coffee while you wait? It's on the house." High above in his office, Arthur Pendelton watched the security feed on his tablet. He saw the interaction, smiled, and turned back to his blueprints. The empire was finally in good hands.